Good afternoon and welcome to today's caregiver panel, Aging in Place, Transitional Care from Hospital to Home. My name is Allegra Jaffe and I am a social service specialist with the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. A few housekeeping items before we begin today's session. So today's presentation is being recorded and a link for the recording will be sent to all registrants a week from today. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the Q&A button, which is on the Zoom panel. We are going to do Q&A at the end of our program, where we'll address your questions. Also, we have enabled closed captioning, so if you need it, please make sure you click on the closed caption button so that you can see those. And lastly, there will be a presentation at a survey at the end of the presentation. So please take a moment to answer those questions. According to the National Institutes of Health, annually, there are approximately 13.2 million hospitalizations for adults age 65 and older in the United States. Often when a loved one is discharged from a hospital, family caregivers don't anticipate the challenges that can happen during this process. Although care transitions involve the coordination and transfer of information between health providers, facilities, patient, and family caregivers, engaging patients and family in the discharge planning process helps make this transition in care safe and effective. So in this panel conversation, we're going to explore the journey of transitional care and what family caregivers need to know and be aware of before and after their loved one is discharged from a hospital. And through this conversation, our hope is to create awareness about this complex and challenging process and prepare you for the journey. So I would like to introduce our four panelists, and then I will have them join us one by one. Kathryn Powers, who is a registered nurse with Inova Health System. We will be having Joan Thomas, who is an LCSW and the Chief Operations Officer at Birmingham Green Nursing Home. Jessika, Eglin, who is an Associates Director of Federal Advocacy and Outreach with the AARP Virginia. And Shamimara, Siddiquee, who is a Master Social Worker and a Social Service Specialist Supervisor with the Adult and Aging Division at the Fairfax Department of Family Services. So we're going to give a few minutes to each panelist to introduce their names and organization. Kathryn Powers, if you could join us and please share with us a little bit about your organization.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Kathryn Powers. I am the AVP of Care Coordination for the Inova Health System. So what does that mean? I oversee case management and social work across the Inova system. If you're not familiar with, if you could go to first slide, please. If you're not familiar with Inova, it is a 5-hospital system here in Northern Virginia. It also has countless emergency clinics, and it has outpatient clinics together with physicians' offices. So my role is what happens when you come into the hospital. So the case managers in the hospital, every hospital, whether it's Inova or otherwise, has a case management team. The teams are made up of social workers and nurses. And our goal in case management is to try and see you as soon as possible, as early in your stay as possible, to assess whether you have any needs that we'll need to consider before you can return home, if that's where you came from. Obviously, we have patients that come in from nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, they're trauma patients. So ultimately, our goal is to come in and talk to you, assess where you were before you came, what could you do before you came, and what do we need to think about? So with that in mind, we try to see at Inova, in the Inova hospitals, we try to focus on the Medicare patients, Medicaid, trauma patients, homeless patients and uninsured patients initially. What does that mean? If you come into the hospital and you would like to have or talk to a case manager, and one doesn't come in to see you within the first day, you are welcome, always welcome, to ask to see a case manager. You can ask the physician, you can ask the nurse that's caring for you, and they will make sure to let us know that you would like to talk to us. That is very important, particularly if you're a family member and you're caring for a loved one that perhaps can't speak for themselves, or you're doing all the work at home and you need some advice. So it's important. Don't wait for us to come if you have specific questions, because although we try to see those patients, sometimes we don't get to see everybody coming in. So I don't want you to think because we didn't come, we're not there. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what are we looking for when we come to see you? It will feel like we're asking you all the same questions that you may well have been asked before we get to you. But for us, it's very important to confirm that certain things are correct. Some of the most important information we need to make sure is right is your address, or the patient's address, and who are the contact people for the patient. It may be surprising to find that a lot of times phone numbers have changed, contact numbers have been disconnected now that people have moved towards cell phones. So if you've had a history in that hospital, typically what will be there is what was there before. And we don't realize, I don't think, how much we change different things. So bear with us when we come and ask you the questions. It's not unusual sometimes for patients to say to me, I just answered all those questions. Well, I appreciate that, but I need to be sure as a case manager that those pivotal pieces of information are correct. Because if I need to order anything for you, or I need to have any service come to the home, I need to be sure that that's correct. It's totally correct. So what else do I want to know when I come to see the patient? I want to know, where did they come from? I want to know, what is that environment like? Is it a one level? Is it a 2-level house? Is it a townhouse? Are there steps up to the door? I'll ask a lot of questions about where the patient lives, who helps to care for them, how do they get their groceries, do they use any equipment like a walker or a cane? Do they need help with any services? Are they on their own? Are they dependent on a relative to do the grocery shopping and bring it once a week? Can they get to the follow-up appointments that we will need to make for them? So lots and lots of questions will be focused on, how were you managing before you came in? What did you use to help yourself? Who helped you as a patient? And as a family member, I need to know how are you managing? How are you managing if your loved one is fairly dependent? Do you have any help? Are you struggling because perhaps you need more equipment? All of those questions. So what I want when I come to see you is a full picture of the patient, a full picture of how they're managing, what they're using to manage, and what maybe would make it easier for people. We also look at if it's not possible to return to where the patient came from, where does the patient need to go, either as short-term or transition into long-term. So we're also involved in working with physical therapy to decide what would be the best discharge plan. You know, do you need to go to a skilled nursing facility? Do you need to get rehab? Is it nursing home? Is it hospice? You need hospice. And we'll also explore with you, are you getting your medications? Are you taking your medications? Do you need more equipment? What are the social needs? We'll ask you questions about, do you have enough food? Do you run out of food? Do you have transport? How is your housing? So it may seem somewhat invasive, but we need to ask all of those questions to get a feel from what can we do to help you, either as the patient or the carer for the patient. Because we can put services in the home, we can refer you to services, we can put equipment in the home, but we can also liaise with community agencies to be able to help with food, transport, housing, all kinds of social community needs that you might have that would help you. And then
Kathryn, I just wanted to let you know we're at 5 minutes. If you could
okay.
Finish up, thank
Okay.
you.
So that's it. I will just say we can be the gateway to services for you. Just ask us. Tell us what you need.
Thank you so much. And Kathryn, if you want to go ahead and go off video and mute, and Joan, if you could join us, and we'll have you share. I'm going to pull up your PowerPoint
Hi
about
there.
your organization.
Welcome, everybody. All righty. Hi, my name's Joan Thomas, and I work for Birmingham Green. Birmingham Green is a regional partner. We've been around since 1927. And in front of you, you can see our vision and our mission and our values. But what we do is we provide housing and services to persons that need that sort of support. We have a 54-acre campus. We've got 3 different facilities. We've got the original building. We've got Willow Oaks, which is a 92-unit apartment building. It has 77 apartments for persons over the age of 62. We have 15 apartments for persons under the age of 62. And the way that Birmingham Green works is we are considered a commission. We are funded in part by the 5 localities that help to support us. And that includes Fairfax, Fauquier, City of Alexandria, Loudoun, and Prince William. And we work with the Department of Family Services. And those individuals send us the referrals from their localities. This is the district home. This is our original building, 1927. This is a private pay model. It does have dormitory style bathrooms, and it really is very warm and inviting. It's very quaint. Next slide, please. This is the health center. So this is 180 beds, dual certified. That means Medicaid and Medicare. It includes a special care neighborhood that has 30 beds that are in a secure, key-coded neighborhood. And that's for persons that have challenges with recognizing danger or may be at risk for wandering. We also provide long-term care services. We have short-term skilled nursing and rehab services. This includes physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and wound care. Next slide, please. One of our fun things that is not only fun, but also very effective is VST Balance. It is a technology piece of equipment, and it can assess an individual's likelihood of falls. So every resident has the opportunity to be screened, and it does help identify deficits in balance, gait, and function, so that we can have a plan of care that best meets that individual's needs. Next slide, please. So in terms of the kind of documents that we require, and I recognize that, again, these are lots of questions and things that you may feel you've already been asked, and perhaps the hospital system has asked you for them as well. But to get the process moving, there are certain documents that we will need to ask you for. And as you can see, it can be quite a few. We can help you get that. And for the Willow Oaks building, which is located in a HUD building, that's a separate document in addition to our document. Next slide, please. For any kind of admission inquiries, please reach out to the persons listed on the screen. Rob Wagner is with the district home. Joyce Raphael is with Willow Oaks, and Patricia McDowney is with the nursing home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. I'm now going to have Jessika Eglin, if you could come and join us on camera, and we are going to share. I'm going to go ahead and share your slides as well. There we go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessika Eglin, and I am the Associate State Director of Federal Advocacy for AARP Virginia. Thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy Friday schedule. It is a pleasure to be with you to talk about this important issue that is near and dear to my heart, family caregiving. I'm a family caregiver, and I can relate to the emotional roller coaster many of you may have experienced. Being a family caregiver is one of the most important jobs you'll ever have, and one of the most challenging. The role can be frustrating, satisfying, exhausting, joyful, thankful, and everything in between. Next slide, please. In Virginia alone, there are about 980,000 family caregivers who provide about 920 million hours of unpaid care annually to their loved ones, with an estimated economic value of $14.3 billion. Today's family caregivers are growing increasingly diverse, with about 40% of caregivers identifying as Black, African American, Hispanic, Asian American, or Pacific Islander. In addition, family caregivers will continue to face the dual demands of employment and caregiving responsibilities, which often include caring for older adults and children. Today, 1 in 5 Americans are a family caregiver, and over half live in multi-generational households. Next slide, please. All right. For many family caregivers, there has likely been a time when your loved one has needed healthcare in a hospital setting. Successfully navigating the resulting healthcare transition is critical for both the person receiving the care and the family caregiver. The Caregiver Advice, Record, and Enable Act, or CARE Act for short, is law in 45 states. It went into effect in Virginia on July 1st, 2016, and it helps recognize the critical role family caregivers play in keeping their loved ones out of costly institutions. First, the law requires that hospitals offer the patients the opportunity to designate a caregiver upon admission. Second, it mandates that hospitals notify the designated caregiver before the patient is discharged to another facility or back home. Last, the facility must provide a copy of the discharge plan, including instructions and information regarding any follow-up care, treatment, and services. This includes consulting with the caregiver and providing an explanation and live demonstration of medical tasks, such as medication management, injections, wound care, handling feeding tubes, and transfers. Any sort of care that the caregiver will need to perform at home. Caregivers must also have an opportunity to ask questions about follow-up care, tasks, and have instructions provided to them in their native language. Next slide. All too often, we hear from caregivers across the country how they are left out of the discussion involving medical care for their loved ones. Sometimes they're ignored by medical staff. Sometimes they're informed after the fact that their loved ones have been moved to another facility. Sometimes they're given inadequate discharge instructions about taking care of their loved ones at home, or sometimes even given no instructions at all. If you have difficulties while your loved one is in the hospital, here are some tips to make sure the CARE Act helps you and your family. First, talk with hospital staff that is caring for your loved one. Ask about and reach out to the hospital's department that addresses patients' concerns, such as a patient relations, patient advocate, guest relations, omnibusman, or customer service. If you are a patient, ask for the opportunity to designate a caregiver in your medical record. If you are a caregiver, be proactive and ask to set up time to receive instructions and demonstration from hospital staff about any care you will need to provide at home after discharge. Next slide. Research shows that the failure to provide complete, accurate information upon discharge may put patients' health at risk. Incomplete and inaccurate information may also cause avoidable readmission, complications, and other adverse events. Patients may also receive treatments that are unnecessary or inconsistent with their wishes. Every day, we know that family caregivers assist their older parents, spouses, siblings, grandparents, and other loved ones so they can live independently in their homes where they want to be. Without them, we know that America's health and long-term care system would collapse. Thankfully, the CARE Act can help address some of these difficulties and help make the transition from a hospital to a home setting a little less stressful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have Shamimara join us to share about your organization.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So I have a very large slide, which will be provided to you guys later after the event. But I'm just going to do a quick glimpse of it. I'm gonna just have you. So basically, adults in aging, our main goal is to help older adults and adults with disability and caregiver living in the community, and their caregivers provide them support so that they can live independently and have a choice, personal choice and dignity as they're living in the community, and just assist them in their day-to-day life. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the main number from this presentation. If nothing else you can grab on, but just get this number noted, because this is our front door to aging services. So I'll let Allegra keep it for like 10 seconds. So if you need to note the number down, you want to go back, Allegra? Okay. Just giving you guys 2-3 seconds to note this number down, and you will also have this slide later, but this is the main number to call to get referred to aging services. Next. So we have several programs there. I mean, I am part of the adult service program, but I'm just going to quickly just go over the other ones, just give you the names of it. And when you read the slides later on, you'll be able to know more about it. But there is a Meals and Well service that's under our program, which provide home delivery meal for adults age 60 and over and adult with disability. Next, we have the VICAP program, which is a Medicare counseling program. They provide Medicare counseling on Medicare options, prescription drug plans, low-income assistance program. So great program to call if you're in confusion about what type of healthcare option you have available. And then there is a program, the caregiver service, like, which part of this presentation is from, and ElderLink. There's another organization, this with the Inova Health System, which provides assistance for people that have different income than they are knowledgeable for our service. They'll provide them service. Next. And then there is the Northern Virginia Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, and they advocate for improving quality of care for people resident living in nursing and assisted living. So they are a big advocate for that, people living in the facility. And Adult Protective Service. They're part of our program where they will go ahead and investigate alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation of those at risk or abuse, neglect, and exploitation, especially people over the age of 60 or incapacitated adult in the age 18 and above. Next. And what I am part of is the Adult Social Services. We provide ongoing case management, care plan development, care monitoring, screening for services, placement, home-based care services, assisted living screening, adult foster care placement, nursing facility screening, long-term service and support. So we are the kind of the go person who will provide ongoing case management for adults over the age of 60 or adults over the age of 18 that are incapacitated or have disability. So, so which I kind of talked about, you can go to the next slide. Okay, and then there is the Volunteer Solution, which is another program. They provide some volunteer assistance for adults living in the community, older adults. They have a partnership with individuals living in the community who are volunteering and helping provide social visiting, grocery shopping, things of that nature. Next. So here are some other way of staying connected with us. It will be provided on the slide. Next. Okay, so now just to kind of focus on adult service, and I'm sorry I'm going a little fast. We just want to make sure we covered a little bit of everything. But adult service is regulated under the APS division of the Department of Aging and Rehab Services. We are provided under AS and are mandated by Virginia Code of and DARC's regulation. DMS is also regulated the long-term support and service with us. And AS offer case management of older and vulnerable adults who require assessment, service, and promote independence, well-being, and placement when appropriate. Fairfax County Adult Aging include AS, which offer continuous service for client. There are some financial and functional criteria they need to meet. And it's, again, like I said, it's for 60 and over and person with disability. And what program we provide is case management. We'll provide home-based care services for individual to help them remain independent in the community. And also we provide screening for those following services in the nursing facility, assisted living, and adult foster care. Next. So, so as an adult service worker, we provide home and community visit. We do an assessment. We do information referral for county services. We assist them with applying benefit application, placement for nursing home and assisted living facility, and monitoring services in place, advocacy for the clients. So basically the to-go person for this adult living in the community. There are 6 units in adult service. These are in Reston. I'm from the Reston team. There is Fairfax region, which has 2 teams over there. And then there is Annandale and South County. So we are located in all 4 different regions in Fairfax County to better serve the clients and living in that community. And among that, we have our nurses who provide also support, who go out to do screening with our adult service worker. And, we have other different teams. And then we also have a medical respite program for adults living in the shelter who are having acute medical need and providing them support. Next. So we can just, this are just pictures of different offices and the workers that are there. We can go ahead and go to these are the adult care network unit in Panino building and how many workers and all that we have. Again, these are all case managers who are there to provide support for different regions. That's the main important thing. And next. And we also partnership with Lincolnia. It's one of the assisted living facility, and we have a worker there that provides some. And then we also have our representative that we just had the representative for Birmingham Green. We have social workers that provide them support also that have auxiliary grant. So we have liaison with there in some assisted living facility also. And then we have nurses who are going out with us to provide screening support. They don't do any medical care, but they're just more there for us to provide, resources, biomedical resource liaison for adults and aging. Okay, this is the Annandale region, just a little more information about the workers and how many workers we have in that office. And then we have our South County office. And this is again, the 4 different regions that are located in Fairfax County. So adult service case management areas. So long-term service and support, the LTSS is a gateway for Medicaid funded long-term services and support. What we do is we go out and determine if individual meets the level of criteria to be eligible for LTSS. It is conducted by a social worker from our team and a nurse, and a comprehensive assessment is completed, and it's person-centered focus. Okay.
And I know that we have a lot of slides, which is
Yeah.
terrific. So these are all in the PDF that have been emailed, and you'll
Yes.
have these. Shamima, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we continue?
Yeah, just the home-based care service quickly,
Sure.
because I know people might have questions on that one, and I think
Sure.
we're pretty good with the other stuff.
Mhm.
So the home-based care service, it is highlighted here in the slide. And it's just one of the main things that, you know, maybe you're not a nursing home level of care, like in adults living in the community, maybe you're, but if you might have some need that you have housekeeping, laundry, you're unable to do that, or there are just some difficulty bathing, but you know, so this is this in-between service. We just want you to remain in home and prevent unnecessary placement in assisted living or nursing home. So this is funded by Fairfax County and Virginia Department of Aging and Rehab Service. And you're based, you know, they will obviously a social worker will go out and do the assessment. And what will happen is it will be done in your home. And there is a financial criteria you have to meet. So it definitely is based on 70% of state median income. And also there's some functional criteria you have to meet. So it's definitely a good idea to give a call if you or your family member or anyone you think might be eligible for the service to our intake line. And again, the service assists adults with some of the tasks of daily living, including bathing, laundry, and housekeeping. So that's one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight. And
Thank you
again, there's
so
so many slides, so it will be provided to you, and I'm here for QA for any questions you have later.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for being here. We're going to go ahead and start our conversation now with Kathryn. So Kathryn, if you would like to come back on video and unmute. So Kathryn, there's a lot that happens during a hospital stay, between being transferred by ambulance to a hospital, from being under observation versus admission status to navigating payments. So what does a family caregiver and their loved one need to know when they're admitted to a hospital?
So I think one of the primary things people need to consider before they go to a hospital emergency room is how serious do you think the episode of illness is? More and more people can get prompt care, if you like, from the emergency centers that are attached to a hospital, but they're not the hospital emergency room. I just caution that in many ways, because the wait in any hospital emergency room anymore is long. It's long. So people have to ask themselves, do I think this is a life-threatening illness? Or is it that I can't just get an appointment with the primary care physician, so therefore I need to go to the ER? Always keep in the back of your mind that there are emergency centers out in the community that you could go to if this is not life-threatening. When it comes to observation, the thing that you really need to know about, if you do come to the hospital and they do say that you're going to be placed in a bed, one of the primary questions you do need to ask the physician is, are you being placed in the bed as an observation patient or an inpatient? Because that does, especially under Medicare, that does impact reimbursement, and it does impact discharge options. So if it's observation, then typically there's a copay attached to that. And also, it shouldn't be for longer than 2 midnights, so 2 nights. So if the doctor says you're in observation, that is for you to know that he doesn't anticipate that he will find something very serious that needs you to be transitioned to inpatient status. This is not a different bed. This is purely a payer status. So you could be in observation, and then if the doctor finds something in that 2 days of observation that he hoped to rule out, that didn't rule out, and it needs more testing or it needs more procedures, then he can transition you to an inpatient. You won't change beds. Typically, you won't change beds unless you're in a hospital that has a very small observation unit. If it has a very small observation unit, you might be in one of those beds. Then if you need to be an inpatient, you may well change beds. But for the majority of patients, you'll be in the same bed. So it is, you really should know whether it's inpatient or observation currently. And you can ask the doctor too, what was in that decision making. He may well tell you, I just want to run a couple of tests. This is what I think maybe it is, but it's, you know, not something that requires surgery or something like that, that he's just watching you and running testing.
To follow up on your answer, Kathryn, you know, a hospital stay can be overwhelming,
Right.
especially for an older adult who may be experiencing cognitive decline or dementia.
Right.
So what do family caregivers need to know or consider when their loved one is being discharged from the hospital?
It is very upsetting for those patients to be in the hospital. As the caregivers, if they have experience of this, know, these patients thrive on routine and the same voices, the same environment, which manages to keep them feeling, I think, they're not frightened, they're more relaxed. When they come into the hospital, it is very upsetting to this type of patient. They don't know where they are, it's all new voices. So what I would say is, while they're in the hospital, if at all possible, I know it's hard if you're working, if you can spend as much time as you can with your loved one, that's number one, because hearing your voice will be very reassuring to your loved one. When they're being discharged home, to you as a caregiver, I want you to ask all the questions. I want you to ask, let the case manager and the doctor know if you feel you need more help. As you can see from the last presentation, there is help, but you have to let us know what you need. We will ask you a lot of questions, but we may not ask the one question that you want us to ask. Please don't hesitate in letting us know whether you're managing, you're not managing. What is it you're not managing? You can't get to the store. You can't get to the doctor's appointments. You can no longer mobilize the patient to a bedside commode. Whatever it is, you need to let us know, because that's how we can help you. We need to know so we can either set up more services or more equipment for you, or we can link you to a community agency that can help you.
Thank you, Kathryn. Next, I would like to move on to my next panelist, Joan Thomas. So Joan, at times after a hospital stay, a person may need additional services to recover before they can go back home, especially after a stroke or a hip replacement. Could you tell us what is rehab, and what can a patient or a loved one expect during admission process to a rehab facility?
Sure. So what is rehab? Well, rehab is when an individual is going to be working with either a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, or a speech therapist. And the rehab is to assist residents or patients in reaching and maintaining the highest level of independence. Rehab offers the chance for the resident to get those skills that they may have lost during their illness or injury. And it is person-centered and designed for them. It does require a doctor's order. And again, at Birmingham Green, we do have short stay rehab. We've got speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. And what sort of things might someone expect? Well, I just want to expound a moment on the observation status that Kathryn mentioned. If you're in the hospital in an observation bed, and you wish to use your Medicare benefit, you need to have 3 qualifying stays for your Medicare benefit to cover your stay. So what that means is, it is important, as our Inova speaker mentioned, to know, am I in an observational bed or am I in an inpatient? Because it is really very important to know what the status is, because that is how the the payments are made. And for inpatient rehab, you need 3 full days in the hospital setting, not 2, but 3, and they can't be the observational status. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. But in terms of the admission process, it would begin with the social worker or case manager at the hospital. They would send us a referral. Our admission folks would review what's needed, look to see that we can meet the individual's documented medical needs, whether or not we have the appropriate skill sets, whether or not they're using their Medicare benefit or a private pay insurance. And then we would do our very best to meet the residents' needs. And they let the hospital know as soon as possible.
Joan, this is kind of following up from what you just shared too, but could you tell us what are some of the factors that could affect a patient's rehabilitation process and who pays for rehab?
So it could be a variety of factors that can affect the rehab process, such as the type of the injury, the condition the resident has, any kind of underlying issue, whether they have a good support system in their home, community setting, and what insurance they have. So as I had mentioned, insurance pays for rehab with the 3 qualifying days for Medicare. That's Med A after the 3 qualifying hospital stay. Then there's also private insurance companies such as Anthem, Aetna, Humana, and United, and they also have their own Medicare plans. So it really is important and it's appropriate to ask questions. So
Perfect.
the staff are there to help. And I think sometimes folks are hesitant to ask. Please don't be. Ask for what you need and your loved one.
Thank you. So my next question is going to go to Shamima, if you'd like to join us. Shamima, there we go.
Trying to get all this mute, unmute. Those buttons are like tricky.
That's okay. It's okay. So what if a doctor is discharging a patient from the hospital to the community before the patient is ready and the person does not have supports in place or needs ongoing in-home services? So what is the role of Adult and Aging Division in the Department of Family Services in supporting the client?
So basically, with this kind of situation, they're getting discharged from a hospital. They're not quite ready. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, we'd be advocating for them to stay at the hospital. Our biggest role is to be an advocate. And if there is any way we can make sure, help the caregiver to be like my son, my daughter, whatever role they are, can they stay longer or can they be transitioned into rehab, where they can get the support, like, how our last speaker was mentioning is, just to kind of make sure there's a good transition plan for them to go into another rehab or somewhere, because our service is not emergency. We go there, we provide assessment, we'll start service, but it's not going to happen today. So that's one of the biggest things we try to put out there is be the advocate and be like, hey, this is the situation. Sounds like your dad, cannot be really out in the community. See if you can have a few more days at the hospital. If the hospital doesn't want to, can they have a safe discharge plan, get into rehab? So all the advocacy work. So being knowledgeable about resources that are available and just be the good advocate. That's one of my primary goal for my AS workers is for them to know the system. And then, the meantime, when they're waiting in rehab, is just trying to start, what are the next step, when they get back home, what services can be placed. So like when they come to the home, we do go out, do an assessment. If this client needs some home-based care service support, we'll try to place that. Again, there's, the home visit that is required. They come back, do the paperwork, and it might take up to 2 to 4 weeks for things to get in place. So obviously, when they're leaving from the rehab, can Medicare pay for some care at home temporarily? They have sometimes aids and things come out till our services get in place. Now, if this client, and then another thing is if they are going from hospital to rehab, if this person meets the nursing home level of care, be an advocate and talk to the social worker at the hospital, can you do the screening? So this client can be screened already for Medicaid because things are going to move faster if they're at a hospital and rehab.
Mm.
So it's, again, the biggest role we serve as a social worker is being the advocate, being knowledgeable about resources, and just making sure that we provide that one-to-one with the client's family member and talking to them, be like, hey, this is where things are going right now. Do this, please do this, please do that. And then, you know, when they're in the community and if their things are going good, you know, just then placing some of the services. Information referral is a big role we play, you know, making sure that, okay, when they're home and that we do the home-based care, but that's not it. We have a partnership with other provider, like, you know, the Meals and Wheel or Volunteer Solution to help them with transportation to appointments, or, you know, we create a service plan. So we look to see what other areas that they could get assistance and make the appropriate referral. So that's
You may have answered my next question, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
okay.
Which is, you know, how can the Department of Family Services be of support to family caregivers and their loved ones when a person is transitioning back to the community, either from hospital or rehab facility?
Yeah, well, just be that, you know, we as a worker will make the assessment, make the appropriate referral. You know, our assessment is a 12-page, very thorough biopsychosocial assessment, which asks a lot of questions. And we try to touch on all different areas, from psychological area to medical area to what social support they have in place. So we can kind of make a proper assessment. And then we do a service plan according to what will help the client come back, sit down, process everything. We have supervisor to help us, kind of sometimes staff, and then we'll make the appropriate referral. So I think just having that one person who's knowledgeable county resource kind of be on your side is a great help. Because if I was a citizen living without knowing all this information resources, I would be lost, because there's so many things that are available to this clients. But unfortunately, a lot of the caregivers don't know about all the programs because, you know, it's not a normal day-to-day thing for them. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shamimara.
You're welcome.
So my next question is for Jessika. Jessika, you can come on. Thank you. So what is the role of AARP in making the CARE Act possible for family caregivers in Virginia?
Yeah, great question. So AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with offices in every state. And our goal is advocating and providing resources that matter to people 50 and older and their families. So one job of our state team and our state volunteers was to meet with our elected officials in the General Assembly and advocate for the passage of the CARE Act. And this has been done in each state where the CARE Act has been passed, including Virginia. We also educate the public on the importance and the impact of the bill, both before and after it was passed, whether it was through press releases, ads, town halls, emails, radios, and even events like these. We even created a wallet card that you can print out from our website that will remind you of what your rights are under the CARE Act for both caregivers and patients to have on them. After passage, our team will monitor the implementation of this bill and ensure that it is working properly. If not, our team can work with volunteers to advocate at the state level for changes in a different General Assembly. AARP also prioritizes research. Just this year, we released our 2023 Valuing the Invaluable report, which raises awareness of the value of family caregivers and the needs to find common sense solutions that will provide them with support, including specific recommendations. All of my statistics came from that recently released report. And so generally, we really try to, advocate and inform folks of the importance of this bill and kind of do a whole wraparound approach.
Thank you for your advocacy and work on behalf of the family caregivers in Virginia, Jessika. We know that family caregivers are critical partners in supporting their loved ones to age in place, and they often are asked to perform medical tasks with no or little training. So what can a caregiver do if they have been not provided or offered education and instructions of medical tasks that he or she will need to perform for their loved ones at home?
Yeah, great question. You can contact the Virginia Department of Health Office of Licensures and Certifications, or OLC, if you believe you did not get the proper support provided to you under the CARE Act while your loved one was in a hospital setting. OLC licenses and certifies Virginia hospitals and investigates complaints. When filing your complaint, be as specific as possible about your concerns and keep a copy of the documents you send. You can email, mail, and fax the completed forms to OLC. Keep in mind that an investigation could take several months to complete, but you should hear back from OLC with a response for your complaint. If you don't hear back from them in a reasonable time, you should follow up with them. Another suggestion that I have is that we do have caregiving resources, AARP, on our website at AARP/caregiving. Some of these caregiving videos include how-to instructional videos to provide you for things like medication management, oxygen tanks. So we offer them in both English, Spanish, there's some in Chinese, Korean, and they're a great resource that if you just need a little extra help when providing some of these specific medical tasks, I would definitely take a look at those how-to videos on our website.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessika. So I wanted to thank our panelists for setting the stage for our discussion to follow. I'm going to ask all the panelists to come back on video with me, because we're now going to turn our questions to the audience to invite them to submit your questions. So at this time, please submit your questions to the Q&A box and I will read them to our panelists. If you know who you want to answer the question, just include the panelist's name and I'll direct the question directly to them. I know we have a few questions that already came in. I believe this one is for Kathryn. How do you go about recommending third-party services to clients that are leaving the hospital?
So depending on who the insurance is, they often drive patient choice. So under Medicare, patients are entitled to choose where they would like to go, and we provide them with the choices of facilities within a zip code area, which is as the Medicare reg says, or we'll actually forward a referral to a place that's outside of the zip code area if that's what a family member wants. I mean, we can transfer patients out of state to different places if it's just that they want to bring their loved one closer to them and they live somewhere completely different. We can work with the carer with that. So when it comes to third-party vendors, if you like, we offer choice for facilities for rehab, facilities for long-term care, home health, equipment provision, and typically we'll offer a choice for hospice. It really depends on, the biggest driver is who is paying. So with Medicare, most people take Medicare, so therefore you have a big choice. But if you have what we call a managed Medicare, which could be the United Healthcares, it could be a Cigna managing Medicare, it could be Kaiser managing Medicare, that often, although the government says that patients should have the same choices, you will find that often maybe they contract with a certain number of facilities, so your choice is a little restricted. So a lot of things, that's why it's important always to know who is the payer, number one, who's the insurance, and before you give up your Medicare A and B to a managed Medicare, what is the difference in the benefits?
Thank you. This might be for you, Jessika. How can we find out which states do not have caregiver laws?
Yeah,
if it's
great
not for
question.
you, anyone can answer.
No, great question. So I saw that and I pulled up, we have a nice handy little map on our website that kind of highlights the states that had the CARE Act passed and in effect since July 1 of 2022. So I will admit state general assemblies and state governments did meet at the beginning of this year. So one of the states that is not highlighted in here may have passed the CARE Act this year, and it's just not noted here. So I'm going to post that and you take a look there. If you're uncertain, you can call your AARP state office. This is something that they advocate for, so they would know whether or not it happens. Or you could also contact your local elected state official. So your House of Delegate member, your state senator, but not your congressional member. This is not passed at a federal congressional level. It's passed at a state level. So you want to contact whoever your state local elected official there and ask them, have they passed the CARE Act at that state level? Those would be 3 suggestions, or you know, simply Google has my state passed the CARE Act. But that is a great question. Let me put the map in the chat right now.
There is not a chat, but you can send it to me and we can send it to the follow-up. Okay. I have a question for Joan. Do you follow patients in the community once they have been discharged
Currently
from rehab?
for rehab, currently we do not follow individuals in the community unless they're in our community. So if we have somebody getting skilled services in our nursing rehab center and they're moving back to our assisted livings, yes, we can do that. But right at this moment in time, we do not follow individuals in the larger community. However, we have case managers and social workers that would set things up to ensure that the patient had their needs met.
Great, thank you. And ladies, whoever can answer this one best, just feel free to unmute. Is there a list of various facilities that accept or do not accept Medicare or Medicaid and Medicaid?
Facilities as in rehabs?
I'm assuming that is what this person is saying. And for the community member who asked, if you want to retype and just double check, but if it is a rehab, is there a list?
I'm going to say, this might be a sweeping statement, that most facilities take Medicare, Medicaid, because ultimately, if you turn into a long-term care patient, it's Medicaid that's paying, not the Medicare. So most facilities take Medicare. Now, saying that, there are a few that are private. They are private pay, but typically they're not the ones that we would offer to patients.
Right.
We're going to offer you the patients from the website. We have to, under Medicare, let you know how many stars that facility has. The only thing I would say about that is often with Medicare, their reporting is a little behind. So although the stars may be indicative of that when it was, when that was published, it may not be current because Medicare's a little slow in updating things.
To follow up with that question, the community members not just asking about rehab, they're asking about hospitals and clinics too.
I would suggest going to Medicare's page.
Right.
They
Yeah,
have a
good
care
thought.
compare calculator in which you can, it's
Right.
literally broken down: doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, home health services, hospice, inpatient rehabs,
Right.
and that'll help you navigate what facilities in your area accept care.
Mhm.
Right.
Shamimara, can Fairfax Department of Family Services prevent discharge from a hospital or rehab facility if the person does not have support in the community?
I wouldn't say that we could
No.
prevent it, but we could strongly advocate and be the advocate for the client and just do whatever we can to support the family. Unfortunately, these are things that are not, is beyond our control, because obviously it's facility has the right to do what they want to do and the hospital has the right to do what they want to do. But again, like I said, we're the advocate, right? So we'll call the family, we'll talk to them, we'll say, can you do this? Can you do that? We'll try to brainstorm different ideas on how we can make this process smooth for the client as much as we can. Unfortunately,
Right.
there are times people get discharged and it's sad because there's not much support available and we have to just kind of make things happen, and just sometimes things don't really happen, but it's case by case. It's hard to just have it. Yeah.
Right.
Patients have the right to appeal. If they feel that they're being discharged and they don't have the supports they need in place, they can appeal that, and that might pause the process
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
a few days or so.
I just want to
Well,
mention, we are at our time, but we are going to stay for an extra 5 minutes to finish the questions. So audience members, if you have to leave, we understand, but we'll stay for an extra 5. Sorry. did I cut
The
somebody off?
appeal typically, though, is only to hold the discharge, and typically after the Medicare physician reviews the medical record and makes a decision. I think what needs to be understood here is the hospital is a medical entity. So we're here to treat the medical and try to do a safe discharge, including what the social needs are. But patients that appeal a discharge are essentially under Medicare appealing because they medically don't feel they're ready for discharge from the hospital. And that's where I think what people don't quite understand. And typically, if we send in the appeal, and we get appeals, if we send in the appeal, say today before noon or something like Medicare will call that patient usually within 24 hours and let them know what their answer is. As to whether that is a medical reason for them to be held in the hospital or not. The chart is reviewed by a Medicare physician. But like I say, it's not a lot, it doesn't hold it. And then we need families to come to the table. I mean, we need families to come to the table, while just what was said previously, there may be community services out there, but they're not instant. We need time to get them so that they are active. So in the meantime, we do need family members to come to the table to help in the interim until we can get services in there.
And again, this is the power of coordination, case management, and advocacy. All that is something that the case manager will be doing along with the family member and client, and see whatever way we can coordinate. Obviously, we're not a magician. I wish we had a wand and we could fix everything. That would be just perfect solution to everything, but we just try it as best as we can.
Ladies, to follow up to that, I have something. There's a question in the Q&A about what if the family does not live here and the patient is alone? So in these situations, when they feel their case manager is not responsive to the request, I believe what you're saying goes the same for this person. And, you know, what is the role of patient advocates at the hospital? Is that where, you know,
it can, that people are welcome to call patient advocacy, but I would also recommend that they ask to speak to the director of the case management department in the hospital and explain what it is they feel has not been understood. We have a lot of patients that the family doesn't live locally, a lot of patients. And often what we see is the patient has often been in decline, but managing. They've been in decline, but they've been keeping it together, if you like. And of course, I know you all know that older people are reluctant to tell their children that perhaps they're not doing as well as they think, you know, they think they are, because they don't want to worry them. So sometimes it takes a very small event for that person then not to be able to manage, or for them not to go back to where they were before. So that is a challenge. But if anyone feels that they're not getting the answers, or they're not understanding the answers, or maybe they're not getting the answers because perhaps they're not sure what the right question is to ask, then there are always people in the hospital that can help. The physician, when they talk to the physician, they can, you know, express their concerns.
Kathryn, because we're very short on time, but what is the role of a patient advocate? What is the role?
They are there to advocate for the patient. So any issues that people have, they can contact the patient advocate office. They are there to advocate for the patient and the families, and to be the go-between for, you know, misunderstanding, communication, whatever the need is. There's a department in hospitals, and that's what they're there for.
Okay. I think we're at our last question, just because we're running out of time. Shamimara, can families and caregivers file a complaint with the Department of Health if they feel they or their loved ones were unsafely discharged and the appeal at the hospital hasn't helped?
That's a question I haven't received before. I mean, the appeal process is always available. I mean, they can always appeal in any And
Well, they're
today,
saying, they file a complaint with Department of Health? That's what they want to know. Can they file a complaint with Department of Health?
I wouldn't know how that would work with the Department of Health, them appealing for a hospital decision. I think if someone is being discharged from a hospital and things didn't go there accordingly, they will have to file an appeal through the hospital. If that's a question I can ask someone else, I mean, unfortunately, it's appeal is set for people, like if they are getting services for us and something doesn't go through, they can appeal through our state department for our services. So I think whatever program is not serving them, they can go ahead and send appeal to the Pacific program. And now if that program or entity doesn't provide that support, then they'll go to the higher level from there.
Mm.
I would start off with the hospital first.
Right, and like Kathryn said, going to the manager or the director, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
Go to the director.
Yeah.
So for the folks who are asking, I know we have someone who's in the hospital now who's having some troubles. I hope you take that and you can, call your patient advocate and go to the director and follow these steps that.
And if those steps don't work, then go to the next level, but at least
Yeah.
start off with there.
Okay.
Or then or send it to me. Send it to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, we are at the end of the hour. And I would like to close with a quick segment. I'm going to ask you all a quick question. And if we could have a very short answer, if possible, ladies. My last thing is, what do you wish family caregivers knew when they were embarking in transitional care? What do you wish family caregivers knew? Shamima?
Okay, well, my big thing is the number. Note the number, call if when in doubt, there is resource available, something or other might be available to you. So don't be afraid to call the number.
And you're
no
talking about
question-
that phone number, the adult.
Yeah, 703-324-7948.
Yep.
Put it
That's-
on speed dial. If you have you're a caregiver or person in need, put that on your speed dial. No question is dumb question. And this is staffed with an intake worker from 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. So somebody can answer your question. So whatever question you have, call that number.
Thanks. Thank you. Joan, what's a quick thing that you can leave us with here?
I would echo that same sentiment. Ask questions. If you feel rushed, say, I feel rushed. Let's take a minute and make sure you understand what you are being told. So ask questions.
Thank you. Kathryn?
I'll always say ask questions for sure, ask questions. And I will say, if it's a new change in your loved one, don't underestimate what being a full-time caregiver involves, and understand that you will need help.
Thank you. Jessika?
I would say that you're not alone. When I interviewed for this job with AARP, my now boss told me a story about how, when you're expecting a baby, there are a ton of resources out there, a ton of books, aisles full of books. Everyone and their neighbor is willing to offer you an advice to what to expect when you're expecting. And when you become a family caregiver, that advice isn't there. And it feels a little like you're alone, but you're not alone. If you feel that way, I highly suggest visiting our website at aarp.org/caregiving. On our caregiving website, you will find a ton of resources, from prepare to care manuals, our instructional how-to videos, Facebook pages with other caregivers, as well as our caregiving hotline number. So if you are feeling alone, please feel free to give them a call. Their number is 1-877-333-5885.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for the valuable information that you shared with us today. I hope that the audience has found this conversation helpful and informative, and that you were able to learn about different aspects and how the system works during and after hospitalizations. And as you know, this is a broad topic. And as I mentioned earlier, there are many aspects to consider. So we hope that you've been able to take practical knowledge to implement in your caregiving journey. I want to thank our panelists again. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge with us today. Thank you so much to our audience for spending a little bit over an hour with us here today and participating in our conversation. So I wish everyone a terrific afternoon, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay cool. Bye.